أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري يسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. So first and foremost, please forgive me the background noise. I'm in the masjid right now. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of more noise than I anticipated. So please, if it is a distraction, you can inform me, sister. Mashallah, it's an honor and a blessing and a mercy, honor and a blessing to be here with Celebrate Mercy. I'll just share with you recently, it was last year, or the year before, last year in the spring, I was in Provo, Utah. I was at BYU at a conference on Islam, and one of the presenters just really talked about the impact of Celebrate Mercy as an organization. This is an academic, and was speaking on it in terms of, it was, like I said, just kind of, the communal aspect of service, and really civil service, and looked at what Celebrate Mercy was doing from the lens of civil service, which I thought was absolutely incredible. And just thinking about that. So anyway, I wanted to just share that. But as I said, it's an absolute blessing to be here. What I want to speak about, the verses that I want to speak about, are the verses 66 through 82 in Surat al-Kahf. So we discussed that we won't have the ayats up, but rather it's the story of, so we'll just tell it kind of like as a story and unfold it, and we'll just I'll give some commentary as we move along. So the story is the story of Musa and Khidr. And I'm thinking of this in a few ways, and I'm thinking of it in terms of how something that was mentioned that I teach at Zaytuna College, or that I was there. I'm no longer at Zaytuna College, but this teaching continues, which is this idea of experiential learning. And experiential learning, we could talk about this as the knowledge obviously gained through experience, which is juxtaposed to what is called propositional knowledge, which is textbook knowledge, and then something which is called practical knowledge. So how do we understand those? Obviously, we know propositional knowledge. This is what we see in our centers. We see this inside of Zaytuna College. We see it inside of the American Islamic College and the Islamic Seminary of America and Bayan and other institutions. Obviously, we're familiar with it. With what we're saying there. And then, we have what we call practical knowledge, and practical knowledge are just things that we understand that we know how to do. Maybe we were taught tying our shoe, or just some things that we know to do, which are practical knowledge. And then I think there's something which we have, which is called experiential knowledge again. For example, one of the things I think about is love. Maybe that love is something that is experiential, right? We can't explain to someone what that is, and it's going to be different for every person. And one of the things I think about this, it doesn't matter how much we write about it, how much we tell someone about it, like you have to experience it. And one of the best ways that I thought about this, not connected to love, but in terms of experiential knowledge is, how do you explain to someone the sensation that you have if you were to eat a very cold, delicious apple after a day of fasting in the heat of Texas, for example. So I can write as much as I want about that. I could have had some practical knowledge about how to eat an apple and how to slice it, and maybe we should remove the seeds from it, and all of these other things. We can go through all of that. But until I actually taste that apple, until I actually taste the apple and I understand, then I'll have this kind of the true understanding of what that is. And when I think about these verses, I think about this, what we're talking about, Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, as this concept of experiential knowledge But I'll take it a bit further. There is a, who I like to call Professor Haroon Sellers at Zaytuna College, and the longest standing members of Zaytuna College. And if you really want to know what a life of tasawwuf is, and you want to know what a life of service and a selfless life, then look at our Professor Sellers there. But anyway, he shared a term with me years ago, and something that we like to speak about, which he calls experiential tawheed. And so we can have this propositional knowledge of studying texts of Aqidah. And I'll tell you a funny story. One time I had a mother call me and say, what text should I be teaching my 5-year-old son in Aqidah? And I said, well, if you're teaching your son, your 5-year-old son, a text in Aqidah, if your son can sit through the abstract dryness of an Aqidah text, and I'll be his student. But the Aqidah being taught, in my opinion, should be sunsets and sunrises, and how the grass is green and then it dies and the love brings it back to life. And this is what I'm calling experiential tawheed. So as I look at these verses here, and if we look at knowledge, what we are looking at is this concept of patience that Khidr, engages Musa with. So beginning here, when we say here the verse in 66, which was just read, قال له موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. So here Musa alayhi salam asks Khidr, can I follow you so that you can teach me some of the right guidance which you have been taught? Which is also beautiful here, because he acknowledges that this knowledge is not from him. He acknowledges that this knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Khidr responds, قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. Right? That how can you have patience? That you will not be able to bear with me patiently. You would not be able to bear with me patient enough. You will not be, as mentioned here, you cannot be patient enough with me here, which I think gets to this point, the next point here. وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. The next verse here. How can you be patient with what is beyond your realm of knowledge? Now, this is where I want to say that this knowledge that Khidr is transferring to Musa alayhi salam, in my opinion, this is something that I understand and that I look at in my own reflection when I'm reading Surat al-Kahf, and why actually I think it's one of the wisdoms that we read Surat al-Kahf weekly, is because there is the hikmah inside of it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transferring to us an experiential knowledge vis-a-vis from Khidr to Musa, then to us, of something that cannot be understood textually. And that's this relation of what I'm saying, or calling here, or I attribute it to my teacher, Professor Haroon Sellers here, كَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِيطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. How can you be patient on something which you don't understand, right? How can you be patient with matters beyond your knowledge? And the interesting thing here about this verse is that really what Khidr alayhi salam is doing, or Allah allows to happen, is that Khidr alayhi salam has qadr, manifested on his hand in a manner that is just perplexing to Musa. And, but this is something that it's really, for us, I feel as believers, that we can use as an evidence for the subtle benefits of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined, and that sometimes that we might detest strongly, right? But it's beneficial for us in our religion, in the case of the young boy, which we'll see in the verses that come after it, or in our worldly affairs, which is the scuttling of the ship. And really, this is, then this is explained by asa an takrahu shay'an wa huwa khairun lakum wa asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrun lakum wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. In Surat al-Baqarah, then we find this explanation of this. connecting now this verse of Baqarah to this story of Musa and Khidr, because I feel this is that entire story. That perhaps it is you detest something, but it is good for you. And perhaps it is that you love something and it is detrimental to you. And Allah knows and you know not. And really, I think, as I said, that's what I feel is the message of this story, to remind us every week. Like, why didn't Allah say that, whatever surah, another surah, why isn't Baqarah read each week? Or why isn't, Waqi'ah read each week, although Waqi'ah is daily, but just say another surah. And again, for my thoughts, or what I benefit from is the reading of this story in this way, right? So he made this example, he, capital H, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made them examples, the boy, the scuttling of the boat, for his gentleness and kindness, and for us to know and be completely pleased with detestable elements of the qadr. And that's what I think, that's where we find ourselves. It's not easy. I'm not sitting here in the comfort of Austin and air conditioning and, having a car outside and speaking on a laptop and having an iPad in my hand and all of these other things. I'm not saying that when things are stripped from us and when we find ourselves, in a straitened situation, that there is some sort of ease and we just, I can find ease to that. No, but it is to allow those things to settle, to pass, to understand that, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good from us in a manner that perhaps we can never understand, that in that bitterness is the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanting good for us. As we move on, to that, and we understand the three things that just we'll talk about here, that when we talk about the three things that happen in the verse, I'm not going to go into the verses and the stories. It's too time consuming, but we'll just take the three major principles here. That Khidr and Musa, on this journey, he asks him, can I learn from you? We read that. He says, you won't be able to have patience with me. He says that, how can you have patience with what you are unable to comprehend? And so it's amazing then, in my opinion, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then uses experiential knowledge to teach Musa this. So then what happens, we know that a child, Khidr alayhi salam, comes to a child and he takes the life of this child, and Musa is perplexed, and he's commanded to not ask any questions. We know the story, and then he puts a hole in the boat, and are you trying to drown the people, the people that are inside of the boat? So again, what I really think about here is that, how do we understand? How do we, like when we say, okay, we are to, memorize, or the ones who memorize the 99 names of Allah, dakhil al-Jannah, right? Like when I think about this, is it just the memorization, or is it for us to be able to have the ability? Is it for us to be able to have the ability to actually understand these things, to live with these things, right? How can I understand yuhyi wa yumeet? Like, how can I understand that Allah is the one that takes life and gives life if I am never around it, right? If I'm never around it. And that's one of the things that I think I remember reading a New York Times article that talked about one of the things that we have become extremely adept at in America is the ability to push death further and further and further away from us. And one of the things that I found as a detriment to us as a Muslim community is that, the beauty of it is that this is something that you would deal with as a man, for dealing with the death of a male member. You would deal with handling the passing of your father, the passing of a sibling or something. You would be a part of that process, maybe even leading that process. And I say that because we just had a janazah right now after Salat al-Maghrib, and I had just visited our uncle on Wednesday. He was unfortunately sick with cancer, Allah yarhamahu. So on Wednesday we visited him, and he passed today. Allah have mercy on him. But how will we know these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we are distant from them? And so this is this example here where Musa is introduced to this sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the one who takes life in an experiential way. And that's why also you will understand that this is why I'm an advocate for us to get your own halal. because you understand the process. In that understanding of the process, you understand the one that gives life and the one that takes life. You understand who is your sustainer, and experientially. Because for me, it's very hard to understand who my sustainer is, a Razzaq, if I'm just getting a check electronically into my account. Then I take my debit card, I get my groceries, and then I put it in the cart, and then I fill my cabinets up. My cabinets are full all the time. I'm not having that type of conviction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as my sustainer. I just can't. Perhaps others can, but that's just hard for me. So these verses, going back to the one that gives life in this one, and then here, this one, the one who scuttles a ship. This is from Al-Hakim, perhaps. We could take that. So we look at certain situations to be able to bring the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in them, to be able to guide them. And then the last one, if we look at the wall, they come to a place, they ask for diyafa, they ask to be served, and they're rejected, and then Khidr alayhi salam, builds this wall, and so again, Musa is perplexed. And the thing that I think about at each one of these is then to show us really that it's establishing from Surat al-Buruj, fa'alul lima yurid, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does whatever he wishes to do with his creation. And just a little bit here, from what I want to share with you is that in this kind of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing whatever he wills, is that, his dominion, that he decides for his creation in a way that will, with regard to what will benefit and what will harm. So Allah knowing what the ultimate benefit is, and Allah knowing what the ultimate harm is. And I think that's where we get confused. That we, in our short-sightedness, we only understand the immediacy of some sort of benefit or the immediacy of some sort of harm. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I think very clearly, demonstrates that in Surat al-Kahf. And I said that becomes my kind of anchor for this reality of having this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he facilitates that for us in a reminder weekly, that as we go through these types of things. So there's no place really, I think, which is incredible in this in this story. There's really no place for human reason with respect to his, capital H, acts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acts, because everything that we're seeing is just something that is manifest, that is manifest through the creation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree, right? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree, existing in his knowledge. He has ilm of it. He has irada. He wishes for it to happen, and then he decrees it to be in the world, and it takes shape however he has. And there's no really opposition raised to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees. Rather, it is obligatory upon us to accept what that is. And that's a very high level of iman that we're being called to in that reality. It's a very high level of iman, and I accept that, and I pray that I may have just a taste of that. But this is, I feel, this story and these messages, again, just kind of in recapping here, that this idea that knowledge, we can say experiential knowledge, which is from us experiencing things, right? Trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can read about trust all the time, right? I can read about trust all the time, but am I ready to trust Allah, knowing that he only wants good for me in what he gives and in what he takes? And then just closing off with this, that really this kind of series of verses, it's about, these are the paradoxes in life, where apparent loss is in fact a gain, and what happens or appears to be cruelty is in fact mercy. That's what the boy, if we think about that. And what appears to be returning good for evil, meaning the third story, is in fact justice and not an act of generosity. So as we try to make sense of the what fa'alul lima yurid, of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to happen and to do, we might, frustrate ourselves in that. But really, it's this idea of istislam, this idea of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are having this experiential relationship, this experiential knowledge, experiential tawheed, understanding his attributes and what he does. So, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا يا رب العالمين. Inshallah, we'll stop there. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.